Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And if you have ever wondered if building a community is going to help you build your business, make money, and create a network, well, today's episode is for you. I want to welcome Sophie Bujold to the show. And she is a community building expert and business strategist who has spent the past 2 decades working at the intersection of building community, improving client experience, and leveraging the online world. She is the founder of Cliqueworthy, and she specializes in designing high engagement communities that are built to scale while the workloads that run them don't. That's an important hint right there in Sophie's bio. For more than 20 years, Sophie has worked behind the scenes leading teams, advising and improving community experiences for subject matter experts, coaches, startups, nonprofits, and more. Today, she collaborates with people-focused businesses that care deeply about their impact and the quality of the community they put out into the world. Welcome to the show, Sophie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Sophie, this is your first time on the Author to Authority podcast. So I'd love for you to just take a few minutes and share more about your business story and how did you get into building communities?
Yes, well, it's been an interesting journey. I started getting interested in the online world very early in the history of the internet, which is going to make me sound so old. But it is the truth. In the age before all the social networks were out there, before even MSN and ICQ were there for some really old school folk, I was online and connecting with people. And we just talked about my hometown. I am from a small community. So the ability to connect with people from around the world in communities that I had never even thought about possibly meeting people in was so fascinating to me. So fast forward to university and to my professional life, I entered the workforce in the agency world, where digital was just starting to be a thing. And I had more knowledge than most of my senior colleagues in that area, which afforded me some really interesting projects and a lot of conversations around the impossibility of creating real human connections through a computer, which sounds ridiculous nowadays, completely ridiculous. Most people are like, what do you mean people didn't think that? And yet at that time, the conversation was real. And I don't think it was a conscious decision, but the common thread throughout my career after that was really about setting the record straight and proving them wrong and using the computer not as a replacement to human connection, but a facilitator of it. So what that looked like in the corporate world was really, I got an early start in building corporate intranets with a, community forum component to it. And then moved on to how can we apply that with some of the social networks that are coming out? How can we apply those concepts? And that ended up landing me in my own consultancy after that, where I was helping people really bridge the gap between like, okay, I'm offering all these programs and I am an expert and I want to be able to increase my impact, maybe step away from the one-on-one work. How do I do that in an online environment in a way that makes sense for my business? And that's where I am today with Cliqueworthy.
That is awesome. So 2 things came to mind while you were sharing your story. One, I had a computer in my house in the 70s.
There you go.
My dad was in computers, working on computers in the 70s. And we had an old Radio Shack Trash 80 in the house.
Yeah.
And you had to physically type the programs in to run anything on the computer. There was no disk drives, nothing. You had to sit there and type in code. So my dad used to write code. That was one of the things he did as a hobby for fun. So he created a game for my sister and I, and he created this program that taught you the 10 Commandments because he wanted to honor his mom who loved the Bible. And so my job was to proofread it because his typing was atrocious.
Yeah.
And secondly, or my job was he would write it out. I'd have to try and cipher his handwriting, which was another atrocious thing, and then type it into the computer. So that was thought number one. So if you think you are okay,
yeah, it was very
a
exciting. We also had some very early computer models in our house. I remember making ASCII art as a kid, and then printing it out on the dot matrix printer. So yeah.
It was so funny because like we were the only family that had a computer.
Yeah.
And I remember back in grade 8, my dad came in for career day.
Yeah.
And my dad was actually one of the most popular ones because he came in to talk about getting jobs working with computers. And so many, it was more the boys, but a lot of the boys went and saw my dad's presentation. And I know that some of them actually seriously considered taking computers in high school so that they could get into the IT field. And I remember my dad telling them that this is the time, you guys, your young generation, get in now.
Yeah.
Get in while it's still in its infancy, and you will never be at loss for a job.
Absolutely. And I would say I did the exact same thing once the internet came on board. There were no courses, there were no formal paths for education on learning how to do this stuff, which was also a great time because as someone who was starting her career, the projects I got to work on are not projects I would have access to in the same situation today. Those would have been given to senior strategists and things like that. But back then I had a really just wide berth to be able to test things and go, what if, and like, how do we use these tools, not just to create a space where people talk to each other, but to, emulate as closely as possible what a human to human relationship could look like. And that's one of the tenets that I use when we're building community and we're making decisions about should we do this or should we do that. I always go back to, if I was in a room with these people face to face, how would the interaction go? And that starts guiding the decisions we make about the type of community we're building and offering.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Sure.
Audience, you hear me say this every once in a while, but what Sophie just said is key to building a business on the online world. If you think that you can just go in, spam people with a bunch of messages, and build a business, it doesn't work. You have to create those relationships. You have to think of the person on the other end. There is no easy way to do it. There is no magic software that's going to create all these connections for you and bring in all this business by, just spamming people with messages. I get lots of them. The funny ones are the ones when they don't even look at what I do for a living on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I own a business, so automatically I need IT support. I need to have programs designed for me and all this. It's like, no. I have a team of freelancers. They all work from home. I work from home. Like, not that this would say this on my LinkedIn profile, but my husband is a high-level computer IT guru. If I want anything done, he just does it for me for free. Well, I guess because we're married, I guess there are some fringe benefits, but we won't go there. But I think that's one of the keys is creating the relationships and within that community. And that was one of the reasons why, Sophie, when I saw your profile on Podmatch, I wanted to have you on because this is actually something I've been thinking about, exploring the idea, even for the podcast audience. How do we create a community out of that? So I'm really excited as we sort of transition into the next segment of the show. Is I want you to talk about that. Like how do you start to build, grow, and monetize a community?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the first stops that I think is crucial is really to stop for a moment and identify what really is a community, because I think the word community has been burrowed by a couple different types of business strategists and people to like encompass things that are actually not community.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, I get a lot of requests for, oh, you can help me like build my Instagram audience. And I said, no, the keyword is audience at that point.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and really the difference between building a social media following and building a community is the depth of those connections.
Yeah.
I kind of think of social media and even email newsletters as all of the same thing. You're bringing people to a concert hall and you are the expert on stage.
Yeah.
And, I would venture to say a lot of your readers are used to being an expert by virtue of having written a book or whatever else. That's a very comfortable space to be. You're on stage,
Mhm.
you're sharing your expertise. Everyone is there to listen to what you have to say in theory. But once you step off the stage, the audience
Yeah.
leaves. There's no reason for them to stick into the room. Whereas with the community, it's a lot more like organizing a networking event. You are creating the container,
Yes.
inviting people to it, providing some kind of value as part of it. But the goal is for everyone in the room to find the people they connect with within that container
Yes.
so that you, as the host, can step away, you can take a break, you can, go do your thing, but there's still value in being in that room and for people to be there. So what that does is it ups the value. Like if you can create that container for your business,
Mm.
that creates so much opportunity. If I look at it from the perspective of, authors in particular, like why would you want to have a community versus just your social media audience? First and foremost, the most obvious, it's much easier to market the next time you publish your book because you've created a space where you're cultivating your biggest fans.
Yes.
You have a space of people who are already primed to want to help one another. And that creates a huge opportunity. I have a few clients who, are authors, and what they
Mhm.
found is once they've had that community, yes, the social media following helps, especially from, the publisher side of things. But being able to also say, hey, I have a community of people who are willing to help me promote this is
Yes.
hugely valuable as well. And it's something that we're seeing more and more in that space. The other thing and the other benefit to having a community is I have a lot of those experts clients who have been able to migrate from one-on-one work to one-to-many.
Yes.
And that's taken a lot of pressure off of them to be on all the time. And I think one of the most important shifts they've had to make, but once they make it, it's very magical, is switch from being kind of the sage on the stage
Mhm.
to being the chief curator.
Yes.
And what that does is it frees you up to give your expertise when you want to, but also be considered the expert enough that when you say, hey, listen to this other person, your community knows that that person is equally as valuable.
Yes.
So for a lot of people and a lot of experts in particular, this is a really great thing to add to their business as a service, especially as they're like wanting to free up their time, wanting to create a bit more recurring revenue and all those things, right? So those are just some of the reasons why you would want to consider building a community. I would say that the reasons you don't want to build a community, because there are some of those too, if the only thing you heard in what I just said was you can make money, that's not good enough to bring people together.
Yes, I agree.
That's just not, it's not a strong and compelling enough reason. Your community is going to feel it if you're in it for the money. And I talk a lot, in a lot of the work that I do about the need to balance the needs of your business with the needs of your customer.
Mm-hmm.
If that's out of balance, one of you is going to get bored and walk away.
Yep.
So that brings me into some of the questions you want to ask yourself when you're just getting started on the path of like, okay, I think community is a good thing. How do
Okay.
I start building it? Right.
So Sophie, I'm actually going to stop you there because I had a few comments for you.
Yeah,
And
sure.
then we'll head back to that. I heard somebody say once that if you have 100 raving fans, so I call them your brand ambassadors,
Mm-hmm.
those people who love everything you do, they think you're the cream of the crop and all these kinds of things, that it only takes 100 of these people to completely, totally change your business. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but when I heard that, it just really changed my perspective. And I'd love to just for you to take a moment and share your thoughts on that.
I 100% agree with that. I think on so many levels too, right? Having those deep connections is really what can drive your business forward. Not just from the fact that, for instance, in community building, you may want to think about how do I get 100 people inside this paid community environment? But also just from the fact that you just don't know who people know until you get to have a relationship with them and ask for help. So I think that's absolutely accurate. And it's actually a really great point because a lot of the communities I build are not built for millions of people to join and be this mass market experience. They're really highly curated. Most of them have applications for the membership to join, and not everyone makes it in. Because we want to make sure that the quality we are providing in the experience is worth paying for. So I would say I do absolutely live by that principle that like your 100 raving fans are definitely worth more than a million people who kind of follow you ad hoc.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And the reason I brought that up is because sometimes people think that they have to have thousands of people for these these communities to be effective, and for me, quality is better. The quality of the relationships is better than the quantity of the relationships.
Yeah. And I think in order to make it sustainable for your business, you need to really balance, okay, if I want less people, how can I create an experience that's worth more money? Like people think, oh, I can charge $20 a month for access to this and that's about it. No, there are people charging thousands of dollars for access to these communities, right? You just have to make sure that it's in line with the value you're offering and also the type of person you're wanting to attract in, right? There's a community out there for executive female leaders, so part of the C-suite of most Fortune 500 companies. Their admission fee is about $6,000 a year. But it's worth it because the connections these women make to help them in their corporate work is invaluable. And a lot of them actually end up negotiating it in their work package as well. So they find a way to get the membership fee paid. For consumers who might be in a smaller market, the money might be slightly less, but there are still a lot of opportunities to monetize beyond even just the membership fee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so you had point 2 there, and I interrupted you, but I'll let you go back to it.
Well, and I think I mean it's the natural sequence of things, right? So when people are like, okay, I understand what a community is. I do think it's a good thing for my business. Like, where do I even get started? And for me, there are like 4 critical questions that have work behind them. But if you don't have answers to these 4 things, you're not going to create something sustainable for yourself. So the first one, which always surprises everyone, is what does this community need to do for me? Which sounds super selfish to most people. And they're like, why am I not thinking of my members first? But the reason is you need to really get clear on what the job of this community is going to be in your business. And I'm thinking, like, the obvious answer is I needed to make money for most people. But for my clients, that looks different for every single one. I've had clients tell me, I need to create space because I want to start a family. I want to build an asset that I can eventually sell. I want to be able to lessen my workload because I'm heading towards retirement. All of those things need to be a consideration within that. And then from the business perspective, is this, meant to take care of customers between book launches? Is it meant to sell your services? What is it meant to do? Yeah. And you can build a bit of a job description. If you think of your community as a team member, build a job description for it. What are the success metrics that I will measure it by? What are the main responsibilities that it has? And once you have that, that's not the end of the road. Then you have to look at the flip side. And that's when you go into, what would my community members want? Yeah. So who am I marketing to? What are their needs? And not just when they join, but along the journey of transformation, I'm promising within that community. Because if you don't understand how their needs change and evolve, that's how you're going to build a community that people join and leave really quickly.
Yes.
Rather than being like, okay, here's point A where they're starting. Here's point B where I'm hoping to lead people and the change I'm trying to make in the world. What are the steps that they go through generally in between? And that will lead you to, what do they need most? And then that's the point where you can get really real with the third question is, how am I best positioned to help them with those needs? And what can I offer? And then from there, it's really about those answers help you with question number 4, which is, so now what does the experience need to look like? You've identified kind of your boundaries of what you need and what you're willing to do. You've identified what your members need. Where's the sweet spot between the two?
Yeah.
And that makes all the other decisions so much easier. What platform do I need? What kind of programming? Like, do I need to create content for this, or do I need to bring in experts? What does it look like? Do I need to plan for offline events for these people because one of their core needs is connection? Those become really, really easy to start putting together after that. Everyone loves starting with that part. It's like when you buy a house and you want to start decorating, but you have to renovate first. Everyone loves the decorating part, and that's where they start usually. One of my number one things that people come to me with is, I need to pick a platform. And I'm like, cool, I have a few questions for you before you do that, But having those 4 questions kind of worked out as you're planning what kind of community do I want to create is critical to the success, because that's where you can actually start seeing, ooh, that's going to be really heavy in a workload for me. I don't like that. How can I change it? Or vice versa. My members probably won't get much value out of that. So how can I make it more valuable?
Yeah. When you said those questions, I was surprised by the first one, but once you explained it does make sense. But what I love about that is, see, everybody wants to jump to the icing on the cake, but if you don't create the cake, you got nothing to hold the icing.
Exactly. I mean, I love a good icing, don't get me wrong, but the cake is good too.
But I think one of the things that you said is that these questions create the foundation of your community. They give it a strong base. And of course, we want to jump to all the fun stuff first. Who doesn't want to jump to all the fun stuff first? When I start to work with my clients on their book, they want to get to writing the book. But we've got all these steps you got to do before we start writing the book, because if we don't do these steps, your book's not going to be good.
Exactly.
And, they're chomping at the bit, and I got to kind of rein them in and go, I know, but we got to get this outline done first.
Yeah.
As soon as we get the outline done, we can start writing your book.
Yeah.
And then I ask them all these questions. And thankfully, I work with pretty high level thought leaders, so usually they can answer it. But every once in a while, there's someone who just can't answer those questions. And I have actually, in interviews I've done with clients before they became clients, I started asking these questions because I found I was getting clients who weren't ready to write books. So now during the interview process, I ask a lot of these questions so that I can honestly look at them and say, you know what, I know you want to write a book, but you're not ready yet.
Yeah.
and I won't take on a client if they're not ready.
Same. Yeah.
Because it becomes such a horrible experience for them. And the book is not what they want. So I'm like, okay. And they're not happy with me, but can't do it.
Yeah.
If they're not ready, can't do it. So we've got a few minutes left there, Sophie. I know the question everybody wants to ask you about. So let's talk about it a little bit, is the platform. Maybe talk about some of the different platform choices that are out there for people, for the communities.
Well, there are thousands of them out there. That's the first thing you're going to come up against if you start Googling online community platforms. There are so many flavors of it. I think some of the general and bigger considerations you want to take is, again, around your capacity and like how much of this you want custom versus how much of it you can put up with in a standardized format. And I say that because a lot of people come to me and they're like, I want everything fully custom. I'm going to build it on a WordPress website with all these plugins. And then I'm like, so do you have a tech team to like maintain that?
Yeah.
Because here's what it's going to cost you to do that.
Plugins do not always play well with each other. They don't like each other at times.
But also just the like sheer volume of maintenance that puts on your plate is huge.
So, and you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
This is not easy, like click a mouse stuff. Like it starts to get highly technical.
Yeah. And then there's this other category of platforms that are really designed for an enterprise client. So people who are using community platforms for like user communities. So where that you can go ask questions about your platform or whatever else to interact with. Typically it's in the SaaS space, to interact with the company, learn more about their products, all that stuff. And those appear to be good spaces for community, but they're also a huge investment upfront. And you don't need to start there. You can start really small. So there's kind of this level of platforms that are hosted solutions. They have been built, most of them by community builders who like couldn't find anything in the marketplace that fit what they wanted. They have an amazing ability to host course content as well. So like if your book has a course component to it, they can house that within your community environment and create this really cozy space for your users. And for a lot of people, that's kind of the category you play in, right? At least to get started, it's a lower fee. All the maintenance is done for you. Everything is hosted. The only thing is you have to be okay with, I can't quite customize 100% of it on your own. And for some, that's a hard pill to swallow. But honestly, as a business, and especially if you're just getting started in community and you're still testing what's going to work, that's kind of the best category to be in. And really, once you know what kind of experience you want to offer, that's the right time to look at these platforms and go, which one is going to get me the closest to where I need to go? It will never be 100%. You probably will have to combine some tools together. But if you know the features that are critical to you, just like when you're buying a house, if you know the non-negotiables versus the things you could let go of, it's immensely easier, and the time to start is a lot shorter.
So I do want to ask you about one platform because it is one I've been considering, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
And I realize you have to be careful what you say because this is a public podcast. So I get it.
I probably will answer with a question because I'm like, ooh, I have a million questions for you.
One of the ones that I've been seriously looking at is Circle.
Yeah, I mean, Circle is a great option for some people. I think the questions that I have, which could turn into a whole other podcast episode, are the 4 other questions:
Yeah.
is what is Circle meant to support, and how is it going to be, like, what's the experience you need to create? I'm a huge advocate of picking platform after designing the experience,
Yes.
because otherwise you're letting the platform lead your choices.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
One of the reasons I considered it, because I wanted to build more of a networking type community where, we could do some lives where I could interview people in there, where people could post content, where, the members could create courses for each other. So that was one of the reasons why I looked at Circle, was because of its capabilities, right within the platform without having to go off of the platform. And I know they're expanding their capabilities. So I think it will even be able to do sort of network meetings on it soon. So I was kind of like, yeah. And the price was very reasonable for what you got. And it's like a beginner's package, right? So it's not going to break my bank while I'm building it. So that was one of the reasons why I considered it. But just, I always love to get experts' thoughts on things.
Yeah, I mean, my 2-second answer, without having dived into the rest of what I do when I'm building community experiences: Circle is a solid option for a lot of people. And, there are a number of up and coming platforms that are similar, if not better, in some regards. They're kind of looking at Circle and saying, how can we enhance that experience? So there's definitely options out there. It really, really depends. Like, it's hard for me to even give you a like hard answer, not knowing, what the four questions we talked about today really look like.
That was what I was kind of looking for. Like, I was looking for, okay, Circle is a solid platform.
It's
like,
a decent option. Yeah.
Not like, well, you might want to consider something else. I mean, there's always options, and there's always going to be a new platform that comes out that's better than the other one. So we're actually running out of time. So this has been a wonderful conversation, Sophie. Excellent. What I would love for you to do is share one final parting thought. And then also, if people have been listening to this and they're like, I need to find out more about building a community for my business, do you have any free giveaways, or how can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the first question and go work my way down. So I think, my parting thought on here, again, always come back to, what does the human experience look like before you look at the tech experience? And also, community building doesn't need to be a mass marketing effort. You can start very small. And in fact, the best communities who are focusing on depth and quality of membership start with small groups and build from there. So even if you have 10 people who are your strongest advocates, start with creating value for them and grow from there. I think would be my best piece of advice in terms of how to get started that we haven't talked about. If you want to learn more about that, I am definitely available on the internet. So LinkedIn is my platform of choice to connect. You can check out my website at cliqueworthy.com, and you see it on the screen, but it's CLIQUE, worthy.com. And I do have something in the realm of platforms. So I have a free platform guide that your listeners can download if they go to cliqueworthy.com/platform guide. And it's a set of questions to just really help them think through all of the requirements their platform might need to have before they start making commitments to any of them.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been Sophie Bujold and Kim Thompson-Pinder on the Author to Authority podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode. Bye now.